Okay, so the small block cylinder heads for the TA motor, 1970 TA engine program that came in the 1970 Dodge Challenger TA 346 pack edition and the Barracuda AAR, the 1970 CUDA AAR, all had the same cylinder heads, engine blocks. And I want to point out the specific differences between the cylinder heads and rocker gear for this particular engine. We'll also cover the casting numbers and the alpha designation that people use to identify certain heads. For example, they would call these heads J heads, but I'll show you a little bit of secret sauce that happened when the factory was casting things. They used certain casting numbers but different alpha designations for cylinder heads. So let's get into the specifics on the TA cylinder heads. The TA cylinder heads are the later model 360 cylinder heads. This is these cylinder heads are the 915 casting number, and I'll show you close-ups of the casting numbers here in a moment. But the 915 cylinder heads were designed or engineered for later model 360 cubic inch engines. As a matter of fact, these cylinder heads actually say 360 right on them. These cylinder heads are unique in the, not in the casting, but in the machining of them for the Challenger TA and the CUDA AAR for the 1970 vehicles. These cylinder heads also found themselves in other engine or vehicle configurations, as the factory did not build Challenger TA and CUDA AAR vehicles other than the year 1970. No doubt that the factory had some leftover castings and used them in variants and dropped them in vehicles such as the Roadrunner. So I wanted to go into detail on these cylinder heads and show you the difference between what makes a TA cylinder head different than a, let's say, a later model 340 or 360 cylinder head that may have exactly the same casting numbers. As you can see in this shot right here, these push rods on the intakes, are canted over at an angle versus the exhaust that are straight up and down. These intakes lay over at an angle, and that's because the rocker arms themselves are offset. There is an offset to the rocker arms that move the push rod out of the intake hole encroachment. You can see that the push rod casting in the cylinder head, the tunnel that the push rod goes into, encroaches into the intake port quite a ways. That is exactly the same on a TA head. Even though they bored the bore for the push rods away from there, they left that casting completely stock, completely the same. So there's no real advantage of a TA head for the production engine. Now, just like the cylinder blocks, they left provision to put 4-bolt mains in by leaving the main web very, very thick through there, so the race teams could in fact drill that, tap it, and put on 4-bolt main caps. They did the same thing here. They moved these push rod tunnels over to the side, had to put on slanted rocker arms, offset rocker arms here, but they never touched that push rod tunnel intrusion into the intake port on stock production engines. So it's ironic that they've gone all this way to make this a high performance head, the ability to flow a lot more air, but never actually follow through and cut this away so the airflow could be enhanced.